I'm going to show you 5 tips to design better jewelry in pencil. So the first thing I'm going to do is start by selecting a designer template because that's going to give me a ready-made design that I can use to show these tips. We're going to go with the heart stacking ring. Okay, so tip number 1, regardless of whether you are creating a design from scratch or using an existing designer template, to best set stones, customizations, and to use your design, I recommend using the cube in the top left-hand corner. It's often forgotten that it's there or missed, but that allows you to center the view to any number of these views. It even gives you views from corners, from each side, and it's really helpful if you're going to place additional stones and want to get things lined up perfectly. So tip number 1 is to use the cube. Okay, I'm going to build out this design a little bit. So we're going to start by selecting now. Let's go in and we're going to select a round stone. And we'll go with a 2mm. And we're going to put aquamarine on the side. Cool. So my second tip is when you're putting stones in place and you want to build a layout, use the duplicate stone feature. So you can see that I've placed one stone here already. To really quickly build this into a multi-stone ring, you can click on it once you've put it in place and you can click duplicate and you're going to be able to just keep going through. And if we wanted to make this, say, a 5-stone stacking ring, this is going to make it really easy. One of the really cool things about the duplicate feature as well is that if you've changed the rotation of a stone, like let's say I was doing a layout with a bunch of pear-shaped stones, then the duplicate is actually going to keep that rotation in the same position. So you can just create a perfect layout by using duplicate, and you only really have to do the actual rotation once. Okay, so now the next tip for designing better designs in pencil is being really thoughtful about your design material and your finish. There's a lot of options here. If you're going to have this manufactured and connect directly with someone to get it made through pencil, selecting the right material from the start is going to ensure that you're happy with the design that you get. And particularly if you want a finish on it as well, like a brushed or a sandblast or a satin finish. Cool, that's sandblast. We're going to switch to satin now. Cool. All right, tip number 4. So my 4th tip for designing better in pencil is to do hallmarking in your actual design. So hallmarking is where you put the carat of the gold that's actually being put in. Now, most of the time hallmarking is done using laser engraving. If you're familiar with just general manufacturing and costs, laser engraving does add a little bit to each cost, so add a little bit to the cost of each piece. So you can get around that by actually doing your hallmarking directly in pencil and doing it as an engraving. So as you can see here, now this will start a little bit large, but we can make it much smaller. One thing just to check is always double check with your factory if you are doing small engraving to make sure that what you have engraved is going to work for their casting technique. Sometimes there are engravings that are too narrow or too thin, and you really just want to check with your factory if you're going to do something like this to make sure that that 18K or 14K that you're putting in the band is actually going to come out. And once you've gone and placed that in place, you can see that that's an embossing right now, but we want to make that an engraving. So we'll just click on engrave. Cool. You can see that 18K has now been engraved into the design. All right, so my next tip. The last tip, tip number 5 for getting the most out of pencil is adding a custom and unique brand element to your design. And you can do that using elements here, similar to how we put the hallmark on the inside of the ring. And By the way, just a quick mention as to why I put it off to the side here. If you put the hallmark at the very bottom of your ring and you sell it to a customer and then they need to resize it later on, typically they're going to cut out the bottom to resize it, which means they have to re-hallmark it. So put it up here and that way it won't get removed if the ring ever gets resized. Okay, so the next thing that I recommend doing as my tip number 5 is adding a custom brand element to your design. Again, similar to using text to do a hallmarking, I recommend doing an engraving with an element. You could upload your own SVG. Maybe you've got either a logo or a custom brand shape or motif that works, or you can find something in here that works for you. So let's do a little heart, since we did a heart stone as the center here. But this is quite cool. You can really have a little bit of fun with this in terms of building up your own little custom, set of images or shapes that you engrave into your design, so everybody knows it's yours. And we want that heart to be a little bit larger. And in this case, so we're just going to double click to place it. And once that's in position, you'll notice it seems kind of high, but that's okay. We are going to reduce the size of that. So if you click it and select it, great, so we've selected that now. We want to reduce the height down. That's gone a little bit too far. I might just manually enter that height in there. So I'm just typing in 0.25, great. And then the last thing we want to do is we want to engrave. You'll see that that will just be applied now. So that's been applied into the surface and has been engraved. And that is my top 5 tips for designing in pencil and creating more interesting designs faster and using all of the different features available to you in pencil.